heard you could get a big breakup payout from dating the school bad boy. My 3 roommates and I took turns dating him to cash in. But when it was my turn, Jake, the school bad boy, discovered our scheme. He suddenly changed the rules. Want money? Marry me. My roommate Emily had heard a rumor that dating Jake and breaking up would earn you a generous breakup payment. So she approached him at a campus event and actually managed to win him over. Less than a month later, they broke up. He transferred her $10,000 as a breakup fee and never asked for any of the clothes and bags he bought her to be returned. Such a generous guy. Emily immediately shared her strategy with the rest of us in the dorm. He likes girls who wear white dresses and have black hair, preferably with a rose scent. He loves mint. Wear mint perfume every day. I hesitated. I absolutely hate mint. Then you shouldn't wear it, Emily clarified. I got dumped today because I wore mint perfume. His hobbies? Shopping, spending money, and buying things. If he doesn't spend money for a day, he gets uncomfortable. Emily went on and on about Jake's likes and dislikes. My other 2 roommates were taking detailed notes. Emily looked up at me. Olivia, why aren't you writing this down? It's fine. You guys go first. I'll copy your notes later. With Emily's strategy, my other 2 roommates' plans went smoothly, though their relationships didn't last as long as Emily's. When Rachel returned, she added a new warning. Never touch his shoes. Especially his slippers. Emily covered her mouth in surprise. You were only together for 2 weeks and you saw his slippers? For context, Emily dated him for a month and wasn't allowed within 3 steps of him. No. When he was driving me back to campus today, his shoes were uncomfortable, so he wanted to change them in the car. When his assistant brought in his slippers, I tried to help by taking them, and he immediately transferred me $10,000 as a breakup fee. He seems really attached to those slippers. Oh, and they were pink. Maybe from an ex-girlfriend. He has a slipper fetish, Jessica joked. I have so many cute slippers at home. I love collecting pretty ones to wear. If he saw my collection, would he steal them all? Then it was our 3rd roommate Jessica's turn to pursue him. She succeeded too, but her time was even shorter, just 1 week. Never drink the bottled water in his car, she warned. I opened a bottle and took 1 sip today, and he immediately sent me money and told me to get out. I trembled with fear. I love drinking water. Great. I probably wouldn't last even 1 day. Maybe I shouldn't go through with this, I suggested. My 3 roommates counted their money right in front of me. The clothes and bags Jake bought them filled our shared closet. We normally shared all our jewelry and accessories, but my corner of the closet was completely empty. Jessica was more anxious than I was. If you don't go, someone else will benefit. The day I got kicked out of his car, several girls were already waiting for their chance. She was right. Jake was like a walking ATM. If he wasn't giving money to me, he'd give it to someone else. So why shouldn't I be the one to benefit? Encouraged by my roommates, I stopped Jake's motorcycle after class. I gathered my courage and asked for his contact info. He tossed me a helmet. Get on. We'll take a ride, and then I'll add you. I'd seen him ride before. He was extremely fast. Remembering my roommate's mention of his germophobia, I timidly asked, Can I hold on to you? He slid down his visor. Whatever you want. With the helmet on, I sat behind him. He did ride very fast. I gripped his jacket tightly, afraid to let go. He drove to an amusement park. Jake took off his helmet and asked, Pirate ship ride. Want to try? I shook my head vigorously. No thanks. I'm afraid of heights. This was so much more complicated than my roommates' experiences. They just confessed, and he agreed. Then let's go on the Ferris wheel, he said. Jake didn't ask for my opinion, he simply went to buy tickets. Our local Ferris wheel was known as the Breakup Master. Every couple who rode it eventually broke up. Though we weren't a couple yet, I was looking forward to breaking up. Breaking up meant getting paid. We sat facing each other in the Ferris wheel car as it slowly rose. Neither of us spoke until we reached the highest point. Then Jake finally spoke. Olivia, what does your dorm think I am? Oh no. He figured it out. No wonder he'd been giving me a hard time today. I'm sorry, I said. He took out his phone and showed me his WeChat QR code. Add me. My hand shook as I reached for my phone. This is taking too long. He grabbed my phone and scanned his code himself, adding his contact. He labeled himself as husband in my contacts. When I got my phone back and saw the label, I asked, "Isn't this label inappropriate?" "All your previous roommates had me saved like this," he replied. After getting off the Ferris wheel, Jake tossed me the helmet again and drove me back to my dorm. I don't know if it was my imagination, but the wind seemed gentler on the way back. He drove slower. After returning his helmet, I quickly ran back upstairs. At least I hadn't been kicked to the curb on day one. As soon as I got back to the dorm, my 3 roommates surrounded me. "Olivia, how did it go? Were you successful?" I showed them my WeChat page. Rachel was shocked. "Husband? Olivia, you're so bold. Didn't you all save him as that too?" I asked. "Of course not," they said. The 3 of them showed me their phones. Rich idiot. Weird temper. Unpredictable. Moody guy. None of their labels resembled husband in the slightest. That liar. Early the next morning, several WeChat messages popped up from Jake. "Come downstairs. Breakfast. My favorite date activity is eating. Breakfast counts as eating. Come join me. We'll go to class after eating. Olivia, are you awake? Don't you want your boyfriend anymore?" Rubbing my eyes, I asked the others, "Why didn't you mention he was so clingy?" They all looked puzzled. Clingy? He barely spoke 2 sentences to me. Otherwise, I definitely would have gotten more information. Our chat history is just adding each other and the breakup payment. He never replied to any messages I sent him. I stared at the screen, still half asleep, the words "Don't you want your boyfriend anymore?" flashing at the bottom of Jake's message. Was he serious? Since when did eating breakfast with someone qualify as part of a relationship clause? "Are you guys sure he wasn't like this with you?" I asked again, still rubbing my eyes. Jessica raised an eyebrow, holding her cup of coffee like it was a shield. He never even asked me what my favorite food was. He just ordered steak at every meal and stared at his phone. Emily was flipping through her planner. He once asked me if I liked pistachios. That was the deepest our conversation went. Rachel shook her head. I asked if he liked dogs, and he said, only the ones that wear sweaters. I groaned. Then why is he suddenly acting like we're in a real relationship? Emily tilted her head thoughtfully. Maybe you passed some sort of secret test? Or maybe he's planning something weird, Jessica muttered darkly. He did label himself as husband in your contacts. That's next level weird. I pulled on a hoodie and headed downstairs. Jake was already waiting outside on his motorcycle, a helmet dangling from his fingers. You take forever, he said, tossing me the helmet. We're going to eat pancakes. We went to a tiny cafe near campus I'd never been to before. It was cozy, filled with plants, and smelled like cinnamon and syrup. Jake ordered for both of us without asking, blueberry pancakes and hot chocolate. You remembered my favorite drink? I asked, surprised. Jake didn't answer. Instead, he cut his pancake meticulously and looked up. Your roommates are boring. You're different. What's that supposed to mean? They pretended to like me, he said flatly. You hate mint. You didn't try to fake anything. I blinked, speechless. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. So here's the deal. I'm changing the rules. My stomach dropped. You want the breakup payout? He asked. I nodded slowly. Then don't break up with me, he said. Marry me. I nearly choked on my hot chocolate. Excuse me? Jake sat back, folding his arms. You heard me. We date for 3 months, then get married. You'll get the biggest payout of all. $500,000. I stared at him like he'd grown horns. You're insane, I said, finally finding my voice. Why would I agree to that? Jake shrugged. You're already halfway in. You passed the first test. You didn't fake who you are. You didn't pretend to be into slippers or perfume, or any of the stuff the others tried to mimic. And you didn't touch my water bottle. I didn't know whether to feel proud or terrified. Besides, he added, his voice softer now, I'm tired of transactional dating. I want to see what happens if someone stays. I leaned back in my chair, trying to think. This wasn't part of the plan. My roommates just flirted, played a role for a few weeks, and walked away richer. I wasn't supposed to be special. I wasn't supposed to be the one he made new rules for. Let me think about it, I I said carefully. Jake nodded. You have until midnight. I gawked. That's not enough time. That's more than I gave your roommates. The ride back to campus was quiet. I barely noticed the wind or the way Jake drove carefully, not like the adrenaline junkie from before. When he dropped me off, he simply said, "Let me know," and drove off. The second I walked into the dorm, my roommates bombarded me with questions. He took you to breakfast? Emily gasped. You were gone for 2 hours. Rachel pointed out. Did you see the slippers? Jessica asked hopefully. I sat on my bed and sighed. No slippers. But he said he'd pay me $500,000 if I married him. Dead silence. Emily dropped her pen. What? He's changing the rules, I said, still stunned. He said I passed his test. Whatever that means. Jessica flopped onto her bed. $500,000? That's not dating anymore. That's investment. Rachel frowned. Or manipulation. Emily leaned forward. What are you going to do? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. That night, I sat in bed staring at Jake's message, "You have until midnight." I opened our chat history. He had sent one more message. Still hungry. Want to join me for ramen? Before I could overthink it, I typed back, sure. He picked me up 5 minutes later. The ramen shop was packed, but Jake didn't seem to mind. He found us a booth in the back, away from the noise. You like spicy food? He asked. I do, I said. He smiled. Good. We talked about random things, movies we liked, worst classes in school, how he used to skip English to ride his motorcycle by the lake. He seemed normal. Relaxed, even. What happens after the 3 months? I asked suddenly. If we get married? Jake set his chopsticks down. You get your money. I get the truth. What does that mean? I get to find out if someone can love me without a price tag. It was the first time I'd seen any vulnerability in him. He wasn't just the rich, impulsive bad boy anymore. There was pain behind those words. Loneliness, maybe. We ate in silence for a while. When he dropped me off at the dorm again, I said quietly, I need more time. Jake looked at me and nodded. You've got until sunrise. I lay in bed for hours, replaying everything in my head. The sudden breakfast dates. The way he drove slower. The fact that he remembered I hated mint. The label, husband, in my phone. At 4 in the morning, I got up and opened my laptop. I typed up a list of pros and cons. It didn't help. Then I opened my drawer, pulled out a notebook, and began writing. If I marry him, what will I lose? My privacy. My future plans. Maybe even my heart. But what if I didn't marry him? What if someone else took my place? What if I missed out on the chance to be something more than just another story in the dorm? At 6 a.m., I texted him. Can we talk? He replied instantly, meet me at the cafe. Same one as before. I threw on clothes and ran outside. The sky was still dark, the streets quiet. He was already at the cafe, waiting with 2 steaming cups of hot chocolate. I'm in, I said. Jake's eyes didn't change. He simply handed me the cup. You won't regret it, he said. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. By the end of that week, everyone on campus seemed to know. Not about the money. Not even about the previous girlfriends. No. They all knew one thing. Jake Lawson, the untouchable school bad boy, had a girlfriend, and he was smiling about it. People stared when we walked past. Some whispered, others openly gawked. I didn't know what to do with my hands anymore. Jake, of course, didn't care. He wrapped his arm around my shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. I don't like people looking at me, I muttered as we headed to class. Let them, Jake replied without missing a beat. You're mine now. My roommates reacted like I had won the lottery. $500,000, Jessica kept whispering to herself as if she needed to believe it again. You're about to make more than my parents did in a year. Emily wasn't so sure. He's playing a different game now, she said one night when I got home late. I don't know if I'd be brave enough to play along. Rachel just sighed. Don't fall for him, Olivia. Too late. I didn't mean to. But Jake was different when the world wasn't watching. When it was just us, he was real. Like when he sat beside me at the library and read comic books instead of studying. Or when he bought coffee for my entire dorm because I mentioned once that we ran out of instant mix. Or the time I slipped on wet pavement and he caught me so fast, I didn't even hit the ground. This doesn't feel fake, I told myself more than once. But I still remembered the deal. 3 months. A contract with no paper. A silent agreement. Stay by his side, be his girlfriend, and at the end, marriage and the payout. It was a dangerous dance. Jake never mentioned the contract after our second meeting. He just acted like we were a real couple. He held my hand in class, texted me good morning, and sent memes late at night. But sometimes, I caught him watching me like he was still deciding something. Like he was waiting for a signal to end it all. One evening, he took me to the lake. It was quiet, the surface still, the moonlight scattered over the water. He laid out a blanket and handed me a small box. "For you," he said. I opened it carefully. Inside was a key. "What's this for?" I asked, confused. Jake leaned back on his elbows. "My place. In case you ever want to escape your roommates." It was a test. I knew it instantly. He wanted to see if I'd take it, if I'd move in with him, if I was serious. I nodded slowly. "Thank you." But I didn't move in. Not yet. I needed space. I needed clarity. I needed to know if this was real for him too. Because no matter how many times I told myself it was a game, I was starting to care. I cared about the way he smiled when he saw street dogs. I cared about how he looked sad every time he passed the flower shop on campus but never bought any. I cared when I saw him stare at couples with that silent longing in his eyes. Jake was broken in ways he didn't show. And I was afraid I was falling in love with a boy who only promised a payout. 3 weeks passed. Then one morning, everything shifted. Jake didn't show up for breakfast. He didn't respond to messages. He didn't come to class. At first, I thought he was just tired. Maybe he needed space. But by evening, I was pacing the dorm, checking my phone every 5 seconds. "He's probably with his assistant or something," Rachel said. "Didn't she say he sometimes disappears like this?" Emily shook her head. "Only when he's about to end things." A chill spread through my chest. I texted him again. Then again. Then finally, "Are we still doing this?" An hour passed. Then 2. Then a reply came through, "Come to my place." I stared at the message. This was it. The final test. The apartment was across town. I had never been there. But I used a key he gave me and entered quietly. It was dark. Luxurious. Cold. Jake sat on the couch in sweatpants and a hoodie, staring at the TV without sound. I stepped in, gently closing the door. He didn't turn around. "I thought you changed your mind," I said softly. I almost did. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. Then he finally looked at me. "I'm scared, Olivia." I blinked. "Of what?" Jake ran a hand through his messy hair. "Of this. Of you. Of what happens if I let you in and you leave anyway." "I never lied to you," I said. "No. But everyone else did." He stood up, walked toward the window, and looked out at the city below. "My father used to say women only stay if you keep paying," he said. So I tried it. I kept paying. Every time they left, I just handed them money and called it a loss. "That's not how love works," I said. Jake turned around. "And yet, all your roommates took the money." I stepped closer. "I haven't." He stared at me. "And I won't," I added. "Not if you don't want me to." Silence stretched between us like a fragile bridge. Then, slowly, he crossed the space between us and hugged me. For the first time, it felt different. No contract. No challenge. Just warmth. "I want to try," he whispered. "But I don't know how." I hugged him tighter. "We'll figure it out." That night, I stayed. Not because of the key. Not because of the money. But because I wanted to. He made me scrambled eggs at midnight and let me pick the movie. I chose a cartoon. He didn't even complain. I fell asleep on his shoulder, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't dream of $. I dreamed of kisses and laughter and pancakes. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of toast. Jake was in the kitchen, his hoodie sleeves pushed up, humming something under his breath. When he saw me, he smiled. And just like that, everything felt normal. That was the moment I knew I was in trouble. Because there were still 2 months left. 2 months until the so-called wedding deadline. 2 months until he had to decide if this was real. Or just another exit transaction. And I didn't know if I could take the heartbreak if he chose to pay me to leave. If anyone had told me a month ago that I would be waking up in Jake Lawson's bed, tangled in his sheets, listening to him hum off-key while making toast, I would have laughed in their face. But that was exactly what happened. No drama. No grand romantic gesture. Just quiet, domestic normalcy. That morning, we ate breakfast in silence. It wasn't awkward. It was easy. Like we had done it 100 times before. Jake handed me a cup of rose tea without asking. I stared at it. You remembered? I asked. You mentioned it once, he replied, reaching for the butter. It was such a small thing, but I had to look away for a second. Because it wasn't just tea. It was the kind of attention I never expected from him. I took a sip, letting the floral warmth fill my chest. Why did you change the rules? I asked quietly. Why now? With me? Jake didn't answer right away. He finished buttering the toast, then finally said, because you weren't trying to play me. He pushed a plate in front of me. The others smiled too much. Agreed too quickly. Laughed like they practiced in a mirror. But I didn't, I said. You looked like you were going to throw up when you asked for my contact info. I laughed into my tea. Because I was. Jake grinned. That's how I knew you were real. The moment was perfect. Almost too perfect. Which was why, of course, something had to go wrong. It started with a message from my classmate, Ava. Just a simple sentence, hey, is it true you're engaged to Jake Lawson? Engaged? I stared at the screen. Before I could reply, another message popped up. Then another. And another. By lunchtime, it wasn't just classmates. It was professors, random students, even my TA. People I barely knew were asking for confirmation. I opened the campus news board and saw it, a headline posted anonymously. Jake Lawson proposes to Olivia Morgan. $500,000 prenup. The post included a blurry photo of us walking near the lake. My face was mostly obscured, but Jake's profile was unmistakable. I ran straight to the parking lot where I knew Jake usually waited after class. He was leaning against his bike, helmet in hand, totally unbothered. You saw it, right? I asked, breathless. He nodded. Yep. And? And I didn't post it, if that's what you're asking. Then who did? Jake shrugged. Someone who saw us. Or maybe someone who heard something and decided to make it interesting. Everyone thinks we're engaged, I said, feeling my heartbeat spike. Jake tilted his head. We are. Kind of. No, we're not. We had a deal. A 3-month thing. This isn't part of it. Jake's expression didn't change. Do you want me to deny it? I hesitated. Yes. No. I don't know. Jake stepped forward, voice lower. I don't care what they think. I care what you think. I think I don't want my face plastered all over the campus gossip boards, I said, trying to stay calm. Jake looked genuinely apologetic. I'll talk to someone. Get it removed. He didn't promise to fix everything. He didn't tell me not to worry. But the next day, the post vanished. And in its place, a new rumor surfaced, that I had paid someone to pretend I was dating Jake. Apparently, when the scandal doesn't stick, people invent new ones. I sat on a bench outside the library, phone in hand, heart pounding. My roommates texted me nonstop, each with a different theory. Emily, someone is jealous. Maybe one of the other girls he dumped? Jessica, maybe his assistant? What's her name again? The one with the scary nails? Rachel, this is exactly why I told you not to fall for him. I didn't reply. I just stared at the last message from Jake, meet me behind the music building. When I got there, he was waiting on a bench, feeding crumbs to a squirrel. You really don't care, do you? I said. He looked up. I care. I just don't let it show. Well, I do. This whole thing is getting out of hand. Jake studied my face, then said, "Do you want to quit?" I blinked. What? You're allowed to. No one's forcing you. He pulled out his phone. I can send the payout now if you want. No hard feelings. I looked at the screen, where he already had the banking app open. 10 digits away from freedom. But it didn't feel right. I don't want the money, I said. Jake's hands froze. I want the truth, I added. Silence. Then he put the phone away and whispered, "Okay." That night, I stayed at his place again. And this time, something was different. He showed me a photo album. It was dusty, worn, clearly untouched for years. Inside were photos of Jake as a kid. Smiling. Standing next to a woman who looked like a model and a man with cold eyes. "My mother left when I was 12, Jake said. She said my father cared more about appearances than love. He turned the page. My dad made me sign my first contract when I was 15. A dating contract. Said if I couldn't build loyalty, I should at least control it. I sat in stunned silence. So that's what all this has been? I asked. Control? Jake nodded slowly. Until you. I ran my fingers over the edge of the photo. What changed? You didn't try to win. You just existed. That night, we didn't talk much. He fell asleep first, curled beside me, breath steady. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what would happen at the end of our 3 months. And whether the truth we were building could survive it. The next day brought a new problem. Someone had left a box outside my dorm door. Inside, photos of Jake with other girls. Printed, dated, labeled. Rachel opened the lid and gasped. "This is creepy," she muttered. Emily flipped through the stack. Who would do this? Jessica pulled out a small card at the bottom. It had one sentence, handwritten in gold ink, "You're not the first. And you won't be the last." I didn't take the photos to Jake. Instead, I burned them. I didn't want him to see them and retreat into himself again. But I did tell him, vaguely. There are people who don't want us together. There always are, he said. Even when it's fake. Is it still fake? I asked. He looked at me then. No smile. No sarcasm. No. And in that moment, I believed him. But something inside me whispered that our story was only just beginning to unravel. Because the more real it became, the more dangerous it got. And I had a feeling someone was going to make sure I never reached the finish line. By the end of the second month, I stopped counting the days. Not because I forgot about the deal. But because I wanted to forget. Jake had stopped acting like a man with an expiration date on his relationship. He started acting like a boyfriend. A real one. The kind that picked up my favorite snacks when I was studying late. The kind that remembered which side of the bed I preferred and which songs helped me fall asleep. He wasn't perfect. He had moods, secrets, and moments when he shut down completely. But he showed up. And that mattered. Still, the box of photos haunted me. I didn't tell him about the card that came with it, the one that said "You're not the first. And you won't be the last." I kept that part hidden, folded at the bottom of my drawer beneath my textbooks. Like a secret waiting to explode. Because deep down, I knew this couldn't last forever. Jake Lawson didn't just date girls. He hired them. My roommates may have played it off like a game, but someone was keeping score. And someone didn't like that I was winning. The first real sign of sabotage came the following Friday. Jake and I were supposed to meet for lunch, something we had done regularly for weeks now. He always chose the spot, and I always let him. But that day, I got there first. I was sipping water, scrolling through my messages, when a girl slid into the seat across from me. She was beautiful in a cold, sharp way. Glossy black hair, pale skin, red lips. The kind of girl who could be cast as a villain without saying a word. "You're Olivia," she said flatly. I blinked. "Do I know you?" "No," she replied. "But I know him." She didn't have to say who. "I'm Camilla. Former girlfriend. Or, if we're being accurate, former client." I said nothing, but my stomach tightened. Camilla placed a napkin on the table and smoothed it like she owned the room. "Did he tell you how many girls he's done this with? How many relationships ended with money and silence?" "I'm not interested in gossip," I said, keeping my voice level. She smirked. Good. Because this isn't gossip. It's a warning. I stood up. I don't need warnings. She didn't move. Just tapped her manicured nail on the table 3 times. You're the first girl he's kept this long. You're messing up the system. What system? Camilla stood too. Taller than me. Colder. The system that lets him stay in control. Once he feels real emotions, he panics. And when he panics, he pays. Then she was gone. Jake arrived 5 minutes later, breathless, holding a takeout bag. I thought we could eat by the fountain today, he said. I followed him, said nothing, and stared at his hands the whole time. I didn't ask about Camilla. And he didn't bring her up. But the seed had been planted. That night, I opened the card again. You're not the first. And you won't be the last. I didn't sleep. The next day, it rained. Hard. Jake showed up at my dorm with a red umbrella and a box of strawberry tarts. He said nothing about the storm. Just held out the umbrella and said, "Walk with me." We didn't talk at first. We just walked through puddles and silence. Then he said, "I saw Camilla." I stopped walking. "She found you, didn't she?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "I should have warned you. She doesn't like loose ends." I looked at him. What did she mean by the system? Jake didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "It started with one girl. She broke up with me. Told everyone I used her. My father told me to control the narrative. So I paid her off. Told her to say it was mutual. Quiet. Clean. And then?" Jake met my eyes. Then it became a habit. I stared at the umbrella between us, wondering how many other girls had stood in this exact storm, wondering the same thing. "I'm not like them," I said. "I know. Then why do I feel like I'm just part of your pattern?" Jake exhaled. "Because I'm scared to let you be anything else." He handed me the umbrella and walked away in the rain. I didn't follow him. That night, my roommates had a movie marathon. I didn't join. Emily knocked on my door just before midnight. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. She sat beside me. "Do you want the truth?" "Because I think you already know it." I looked at her. Jake has money. Jake has issues. But you're the only one he ever tried to actually fix anything for. He never took us seriously. We were a game. You're not. It helped a little. Until Monday morning. That was when everything shattered. I woke up to 37 missed calls. 12 messages. And 1 campus-wide email. Subject line, "Scandal, Olivia Morgan paid to date Jake Lawson." The message included screenshots, edited and heavily manipulated, but convincing enough to throw me into a panic. Text messages I never sent. Bank account activity that wasn't mine. Even fake photos of me meeting with strangers labeled as agents. I barely had time to process it when the knock came on the door. Campus security. I was suspended pending an investigation. Jake was already outside when I was escorted from my dorm. He tried to get to me, but they kept him back. His voice broke through the crowd. "Olivia, I didn't do this." I didn't answer. Because I didn't know what to believe. By the time I was brought to the admin building, the press was already calling. They took my phone. They took my access badge. They took everything but my name. And for the first time since this started, I realized how fragile my life had become. It had taken one rumor to launch me into Jake's world. And one lie to tear it apart. When I was finally allowed to speak to someone, they handed me a folder. Inside were printed screenshots and witness statements. The same card was tucked between the pages. "You're not the first. And you won't be the last." This time, though, something was different. There was a signature at the bottom. Camilla Rose Sorrento. She wasn't just a bitter ex-girlfriend. She was the one pulling the strings. Jake tried to visit me that night. I refused. Not because I didn't believe him. But because I didn't believe anyone. The next day, Emily came to find me. She handed me a flash drive. "Rachel did some digging," she said. "We found something." It was a video. Footage from a security camera outside a restaurant 2 weeks ago. Camilla meeting with a guy who worked in the admin building. Handing him an envelope. I watched it 3 times. Then I picked up the phone and called Jake. He answered instantly. Olivia? I have proof, I said. I know who did it. Are you safe? He asked. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Come to my place, he said. We'll fix this. This time, I didn't hesitate. Because I wasn't running toward the money. I was running toward the only person who had never asked me to be anyone else. Jake's apartment was warm when I stepped inside, but I was still shaking. Not from the cold. From everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. False accusations. Public suspension. My phone confiscated. Being treated like a criminal on my own campus. And worst of all, being forced to question the only person who had ever looked at me like I mattered more than the game. Jake stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes heavy with something between guilt and fury. I'm sorry, he said before I even took off my coat. I didn't answer right away. I dropped my backpack on the floor and pulled out the flash drive Emily had given me. I have proof. Camilla is behind it. Jake took the flash drive carefully and plugged it into his laptop. I watched his jaw clench as the video played. Camilla, dressed like she was going to a gala, sliding an envelope across the table to the admin assistant. The guy nodded, then slipped the envelope inside his jacket. Jake didn't speak for a full minute after the clip ended. Then he said, "We're going to expose her." "You say that like it's easy," I whispered. Jake turned to me. "It is. When you've got more money than patience." That night, Jake made calls. He didn't pace or raise his voice. He just sat at the kitchen counter, laptop open, sending emails and messages like a man preparing for war. I sat across from him, nursing a mug of tea and watching the shadows shift in his eyes. "Camilla doesn't care about money," I said after a long silence. "She cares about control." "She's going to lose both," Jake replied. He reached across the table and took my hand. "You're not going back to that dorm. Stay here until this is over." "I'm not hiding." "It's not hiding. It's being smart." I nodded, but the weight in my chest stayed. I was tired. Not just from the scandal, but from pretending this was still just a deal. Because somewhere between week 1 and week 8, Jake Lawson had stopped being a transaction. And started being my person. The next morning, Jake called in a favor from a friend in the legal department. We met at a small cafe off campus. The lawyer's name was Jeremy Wu. Calm, sharp-eyed, and far too well-dressed for someone who specialized in student misconduct cases. He slid a folder across the table. "This is Camilla's pattern," Jeremy said. "She's done this before. Twice. Once in London. Once in New York. Both times with high-profile students." He opened the file. In both cases, the victims were cleared. But not before they lost scholarships, internships, and in one case, an entire semester. "Why isn't she banned from campus?" I asked, stunned. "Because no one ever files formal charges," Jeremy replied. "They take the money, sign NDAs, and move on." Jake's fists clenched. "Not this time." Jeremy leaned back. "We'll need a statement. From Olivia. And we'll need to go public." I swallowed. "Public?" Jake looked at me gently. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for." But I was ready. Because I was done letting people write my story for me. That night, I sat on Jake's couch and typed the statement. It wasn't long. It didn't have to be. "My name is Olivia Morgan. I did not accept money to date Jake Lawson. I have never received payment, and I never intended to. Any evidence to the contrary is false, fabricated, and part of a targeted campaign against me. I have proof. And I'm not afraid anymore." Jake posted it from his account. Then I posted it from mine. Within 10 minutes, both of our inboxes were full. Support. Hate. Curiosity. The usual chaos of the internet. And then something unexpected happened. Camilla responded. "You think this is new? This is how the game works. You lost the second you believed he was different." She included a photo of Jake with another girl. Someone I didn't recognize. Jake stared at the image for a long time. "She was one of the first," he said softly. "Her name was Layla. She left before the first breakup fee ever existed." "What happened?" I asked. "She loved me. And I destroyed it. So I made a system to protect myself. A way to keep people from getting too close. And now? I whispered. He looked at me. You got close anyway. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain came back, tapping softly on the windows. Jake was on the balcony, staring out at the sky. I walked out and stood beside him. If we get through this, I said, what happens at the end of the 3 months? He didn't answer at first. Then he said, there's no more contract. What about the money? No more payouts. No more rules. I took a breath. Then what are we? Jake turned to me. You're the only person I've ever wanted to stay without being paid to. I nodded. Then prove it. The next day, Jake held a press conference. Yes, a real one. His family's foundation owned a media company. He used it. Standing beside me in a navy jacket and white sneakers, he looked nothing like the arrogant bad boy people assumed he was. He told the truth. About the contracts. The payouts. The emotional walls. And the girl who broke them down. He didn't name Camilla. Not directly. But everyone knew. And then, finally, he said something that silenced the entire room. I offered Olivia a deal. Stay with me for 3 months. Get $500,000 at the end. She stayed. And she never asked for a dime. He pulled out a check. I'm giving the money to the campus mental health program. Because maybe, if I had gotten help earlier, I wouldn't have needed to buy affection. There was no applause. No cheers. Just silence. The kind of silence that carries weight. That night, I got my student access reinstated. The admin assistant involved was suspended indefinitely. Camilla? Gone. She withdrew from school the next morning and left no forwarding contact. Jake didn't say her name again. And neither did I. The storm had passed. But I knew the aftershocks were still coming. Because the biggest question still lingered. Not whether I would stay. But whether Jake could let himself be loved without conditions. And whether I could stop waiting for the next test. Because love with Jake was never simple. And it was never safe. But it was real. And that, somehow, made it worth the risk. 3 days. That was all we had left. 3 days until the deal was officially over. 3 days until Jake Lawson either handed me $500,000 or didn't. We had both said we were past it. That it was no longer about the money, the contract, or the strange origin of our so-called relationship. But the number hung in the air like static. $500,000. The weight of it pressed on everything, especially now that the scandal had passed and people were watching more closely than ever. Jake tried to act normal. He texted me good morning. Held my hand on campus. Took me to a ramen place I loved that had terrible lighting but perfect broth. But I could feel him pulling back. The tighter I held his hand, the looser his grip felt. It was small things. He stopped humming while cooking. He answered questions with single words. He didn't smile with his eyes anymore. I didn't ask why. Because deep down, I already knew. He was preparing for goodbye. And so, I did something desperate. I planned a surprise date. It was silly and impulsive and completely on me. I rented a rooftop garden space near the art building, a place few students even knew existed. I bought fairy lights, battery-operated lanterns, and the most mismatched collection of picnic food I could find at the local store. Then I texted him. Come to the rooftop. No helmets. No rules. Just us. He arrived 20 minutes later, still in his blazer from his internship meeting, his tie loosened and one eyebrow raised. You're not kidnapping me, are you? He asked, only half joking. I smiled. If I were, would you fight it? Jake took in the sight of the blanket, the food, the glowing lights. His expression softened. Not even a little. We sat under the stars, passing containers of food back and forth. Mac and cheese, sushi, cookies, cold spring rolls. None of it made sense together. All of it tasted perfect. For a while, it was easy. It felt like the version of us that existed before the lies and payments and sabotage. I leaned back and stared at the sky. Do you think we'll laugh about this someday? I asked. Jake looked over. We're laughing about it now. Not really, I said. We're surviving it. He didn't answer. just watched me with an unreadable expression. Then he said, "There's something I need to tell you." I sat up. "What?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. I didn't take it. "Is that what I think it is?" Jake nodded. "The payout. It's ready." "I told you I didn't want it," I said, voice tight. He set the envelope down on the blanket between us like it might catch fire. "I know. But I needed to be ready." "For what?" Jake's voice was quiet. "For if you leave." I stared at him. "Jake," I said, "I'm not leaving." "You should," he replied. "Why?" He looked away. "Because I don't know how to love someone without paying them to stay." I reached across the space and shoved the envelope aside. "I stayed," I said. "Even when the school turned against me. Even when your ex tried to ruin my life. Even when people whispered every time we walked by. I stayed." Jake's jaw tensed. "I don't want to be the reason you lose everything." "Then stop pushing me away." For a moment, we just stared at each other in the glow of the fairy lights. Then he said something so soft I barely caught it. "I'm in love with you." I felt the ground shift beneath me. Not because I didn't know, but because hearing it shattered something that had been building between us for months. The fear. The doubt. The silence. I leaned forward. "Say it again." Jake met my eyes. "I'm in love with you." I kissed him before he could say anything else. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a scene from someone else's plan. It wasn't a part of a rumor or a deal or a transaction. It was real. Messy. Terrifying. And completely mine. After that night, something changed. Jake stopped checking his phone constantly. He started humming again while cooking. He even let me move a toothbrush into his bathroom. It felt like we had finally arrived at the real version of us, untangled from the past. But the world didn't want to let us be happy for long. On the last day of the deal, day 90, we received an invitation. Hand-delivered. The Camilla Sorrento Foundation requests the presence of Jake Lawson and Olivia Morgan at the annual donor gala. It was a slap in the face. She had started a foundation. Named after herself. Used the fallout of the scandal to rebrand as an advocate for honesty in elite relationships. Whatever that meant. The invitation was more than just a provocation. It was bait. Jake wanted to ignore it. Let her rot in her designer swamp, he said. But I had a different idea. Let's go, I said. Let them see who we are. Together. Jake wasn't convinced at first, but eventually, he agreed. We walked into the gala hand in hand. Jake in a black tux. Me in a simple navy dress that made me feel like myself, not someone performing a role. The room went quiet when we entered. Camilla was near the stage, a champagne flute in hand, wearing a crimson gown that looked like it cost more than my tuition. She saw us. And she smiled. But it wasn't victory. It was surrender. Jake didn't say a word to her. Neither did I. Because we didn't need to. By midnight, we had left. Back in his apartment, I changed into pajamas and curled up on the couch. Jake joined me, holding 2 mugs of tea. Today was the last day, I said quietly. I know. No more deals, I added. Jake looked at me. Then let me ask without contracts, without conditions. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught. Olivia Morgan, he said, voice steady, will you stay? He didn't say marry me. He said stay. Which, somehow, meant more. Yes, I whispered. He smiled and opened the box. Inside was not a diamond ring. It was a thin gold band. Simple. Uncomplicated. Real. Like us. I never thought I would say this, but the morning after the contract ended felt normal. There were no confetti explosions, no dramatic headlines, no scandal. Just sunlight. And Jake, barefoot in his kitchen, humming something off-key while flipping pancakes that were slightly too burnt on one side. I thought rich boys had chefs, I teased from the couch. I fired them, he said without turning. Too much judgment when I use syrup from the bottle. You're ungovernable. He grinned. You're still here. I was. No payout. No expiration date. Just me, still in his oversized sweatshirt, sipping coffee from a chipped mug he refused to throw away because, according to him, it had character. We had made it to the end. And then past it. But just because the deal was over didn't mean our story was. There were still questions to answer. What happened next? Where were we going? Would the world ever see us as more than a transaction? Jake surprised me by addressing that first. Later that afternoon, he held a private press conference, only a few journalists, no live stream, no glamour. He stood beside me, hand in mine, and said clearly into the microphone. There is no payout. No contract. No hidden arrangement. Olivia Morgan stayed because she wanted to. And I stayed because I realized I could not afford to lose her, not in dollars, not in dignity, not in any way that counts. He paused, then looked directly at me. For the first time in my life, I am in something that's real. A week later, the whispers began to die. A month later, people on campus greeted me without tension in their voice. And 3 months after that, something miraculous happened. I forgot we had ever started with a deal at all. We went grocery shopping. Argued over what pasta shape was superior. Painted one wall of his living room pale green because I said it made me feel calm, and he said that was reason enough. There were no more extravagant dates, no more testing boundaries. Only simple, steady things. One day I found Jake in the hallway, staring at the slipper rack. He had never let anyone near it before. But that day, he picked up a pair of pink slippers, mine, and moved them beside his. I didn't say anything. Just kissed his shoulder and held his hand. Some nights, I still ask myself why it worked. Why we made it, when so many others didn't. Jake had once told me the truth scared him. That real love felt like giving someone the knife and trusting them not to use it. Maybe that was the answer. We had both held the knife. And we both put it down. But not everything stayed calm. One Saturday morning, we received a letter. It was postmarked from another city. No return address. The handwriting was familiar. Inside was a single photo. Jake and me, sitting on the rooftop during our picnic date. The fairy lights, the food, the mismatched containers. My laugh frozen in time. His eyes locked on mine. No threats. No note. Just the photo. Jake stared at it for a long time. Camilla? I asked softly. He nodded once. Probably. Should we be worried? Jake folded the photo and tucked it away in a drawer. No, he said. She can watch all she wants. But she doesn't get to rewrite this story. And that was it. She never reached out again. Life didn't return to how it was before. It couldn't. But it became something else. Better. I returned to classes. Jake took a break from his family business and enrolled in one course with me, Introduction to Comparative Literature. He hated it. But he sat next to me, took notes in ridiculous colored pens, and wrote essays that were way too dramatic just to make me laugh. We found new rhythms. Waking up together. Falling asleep to the sound of rain on his windows. Fighting over laundry schedules. Celebrating nothing in particular with cupcakes from the bakery on 5th Street. And slowly, the world stopped watching. We became background characters in other people's gossip. Which was fine by me. Because Jake and I were busy building something no headline could capture. Something boring and beautiful and real. One night, lying on the couch with my head on his chest, Jake whispered, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we never made that deal?" I nodded. Sometimes. And? I think we would have missed each other, I said. Because we would have assumed we were too different. That we weren't worth the risk. Jake kissed my forehead. But we were. We didn't need contracts anymore. Or titles. Or numbers. But one day, much later, when the spring came back and the cherry blossoms bloomed around campus again, Jake knelt beside me on a quiet street bench and opened a small box. It wasn't dramatic. There was no audience. Just us. And a question. Will you keep staying? I laughed. And I cried. And I said yes.